What is going on, everybody? Happy Monday to you. This is episode 3 of Let's Be Frank with your host, Frank Mattis. And boy, do we have a lot to get into today. We have the Eagles getting their first win of the season against the Green Bay Packers in Brazil. We have NFL Week 1, and I'll give you some of my thoughts on some of the games that transpired. We have Week 2 in college football to get into. We have Sean Brady getting a huge win against Gilbert Burns, and I'll also discuss a little bit about the Phillies. But first, let's talk about those Philadelphia Eagles. Wow. What an interesting game on Friday night, to say the least. The Eagles get a win over the Green Bay Packers in Brazil, 34-29, sort of similar to my score of 35-31. Just saying. And yeah, what a game. From a Friday night game, Friday Night Lights vibe, to bad field conditions in Brazil, and I'll discuss that a little bit later, but they get a much-needed win against a really good team in the Green Bay Packers. And Saquon Barkley shows out, man. He looked incredible in his debut. And if you're a New York Giants fan, man, I don't know what to say, because the fact that he gets 3 touchdowns, Saquon Barkley, and the Giants get 0, man, that stings. Saquon was tremendous. He had 24 carries, 109 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also had a tremendous touchdown grab. Beautiful throw by Jalen Hurts. I said it to in my last podcast, talking about how they needed to run the football. They needed to establish the run to get him going and ultimately get the rest of your offense involved and play off of loading up the box and keying on Saquon and then spread the ball around. And that's pretty much what they did. Saquon was tremendous despite the field conditions. He really adds a whole new element to this offense. And, Jalen Hurts wasn't perfect in this game. He obviously had some bad moments, but Saquon Barkley is a guy that can erase a lot of those issues. He was fantastic, and he's gonna add a whole new element to this offense. And I've also, I mentioned Jalen Hurts. I thought he was fine overall, but he made 2 really bad interceptions, 2 ill-advised throws that should have not been made. You got to be smart about that. But all in all, he was able to respond and spread the ball around, which was huge. That's something that this team really needs to do, is to get everybody involved, because they have a multitude of weapons to get going, and they did that with guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And A.J. had a really good game, 5 catches, 119 yards, and a tutty. He was spectacular and proves that he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, if you rank the wide receivers in the NFL, to me, it's Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb. I don't care what anyone says. Mike Evans is a top 5 receiver. When you produce nothing but 1,000-yard receiving seasons and a Super Bowl ring, you're a top 5 receiver. AJ's as good as anybody in the NFL, and to do that against Jair Alexander is key. So I'm not really surprised that the offense showed out. I knew that they were going to be able to take advantage of, a mid defense in the Green Bay Packers, and they did just that. Like I said, I thought Jalen Hurts was fine. He ultimately got the dub. That's all that matters. He did make throws and plays when he needed to. That throw to Saquon Barkley was a beautiful throw, one of his best throws that I've seen. And getting the dub is all that matters. But the turnovers are an issue. He clearly wasn't on the same page with Cam Jurgens as center throughout the game. It's something that they'll work on and get better over time. But if he can minimize the turnovers with the artillery he has on the offense, it's going to be a tough team to beat. But if he continues to turn the ball over, it's not sustainable. And because we have such a good team and because we're stacked offensively, you're able to overcome 3 turnovers. If you're a team, like the New York Giants or the Panthers, I mean, that's a death sentence. There's no way you're going to come back from that. But luckily, the Eagles have a really good team to overcome that, going up against a good team in the Green Bay Packers. So yeah, the offense puts up 400 plus yards. They did their job. They ultimately helped us get the dub. So yeah. And then defensively, look, it was a mixed bag, but I'm going to defend the defense here. Listen, when you play on a horrible field when you're going up against a really potent, high potent offense in the Green Bay Packers in week one, it's hard to overcome that. I'm willing to give them a pass here. It was essentially bend, don't break. And when your quarterback and your offense turns the ball over and gives Jordan Love and the Packers good field position, and you're only down 6 points as opposed to 14, I mean, that's the game right there. If they gave up 14 points as opposed to 6, they don't win that football game. So hats off to the defense for weathering the storm, despite being in really bad field position. You cannot put that on the defense. The defense came up huge there. I cannot overstate how important that was to only get 6 as opposed to it was only giving up 14 points. That was huge there. Zach Bond, defensive player of the game, for 15 tackles, 2 sacks. I've said it before, linebacker's not a position that the Eagles put a premium on. But if we can get one competent linebacker like Zach Bond, I'll take it, because linebacker play last year was absolutely abysmal. And if Zach Bond can continue to play like this and fly over the field and get sacks, we're going to be in good shape. And obviously Devin White was out. There was rumors that he would, possibly get traded. So who knows what we have there. Nakobe Dean had an up and down game, did some nice things, but he still has some work to do. So your linebacking core has a lot of question marks. And if we can have one solidifying player, one solid player in Zach Bond, I'll take it. And that was a really good debut for him. He sort of kind of gives me that TJ Edwards vibe where, he can fly around the field. He's not the most athletic, but he's where he needs to be. And he's a guy that not a lot of people had on their radar, but if he can ultimately be a solidifying force at linebacker, I think we'll be in good shape. Kenyon Mitchell had a great debut. It's funny, A.J. Brown talked about going up against him in training camp and how he, despite the fact he's going up against AJ and Devontae, he's willing to talk trash and get in their face and weather the storm going up against those good receivers. And he did that on Friday night, and he's getting in the faces of Green Bay Packers players. I love it. He's already a perfect Eagle in my book. It's a good debut for him. So I liked what I saw from him there. And look, like I mentioned before, it was not pretty defensively. They gave up 400 plus yards, but when you factor in the field position, the field conditions, obviously you would like to see more of a pass rush. But again, like how it's got to be hard to get traction on those on that field and try to get after the quarterback. And they did get lucky with some bad Jordan Love throws. So they kind of got bailed out there, but again, bend don't break, and they ultimately got it done. They started off strong. The middle part of the game wasn't the best, but they came up when they needed to come up big, and they helped us win that game. So I know it's not sustainable given the numbers that they gave up, but ultimately, to me, I think the way they started, the way they finished is all that matters. So, there's some room for improvement there, but ultimately I think they did their job, and that could have easily started out 14-0, and the fact it was only 6-0 was the ultimate decider in that game, honestly, when you really think about how the game went. So kudos to them for weathering the storm. I've talked about the field conditions. Enough of these international games. Listen, I know the NFL wants to expand. I know they're making, money, crazy money, right? They're making, money hand over fist with their international games, but you're not looking out for your players when you're doing that. When you ask your players to take an 8-hour plane ride to a different continent, that's a tough ask. And then the fact that the Packers had a 2-hour drive to the stadium, that's ridiculous. You're not looking out for the players and the players who are ultimately your most important commodity, your most important asset. And if I'm the NFL Players Association and the owners want to talk about, expanding to 18 games. Fine, you can have 18 games. We're not doing these international games. You can make your money elsewhere. The NFL is so good at that. You don't need to have these international games. I know you're making a lot of money there, but there's other ways you can make money. It's the NFL, for crying out loud. They're a juggernaut. So we got to do without these international games. So yeah, that's that for the Eagles. I'm curious to see what people like Nick Wright have to say now, saying that the Eagles are going to finish third in the division and are not a top 10 team. I think you want to make a little revision there, Nick. Skip Bayless 2.0, talking that the Eagles are going to be a third place team. I mean, get the hell out of here. But then again, this is the same guy that said that Dak Prescott and Bill Belichick will be New York Giants next year. Well, not for the next 4 years. It won't be for Dak Prescott. He won't be playing for the New York Giants. So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt. I don't understand why that guy has a platform like he does. He's Skip Bayless 2.0. And you also have people like Angelo Cataldi saying that the Eagles are going to win 5 games and that that the Green Bay Packers game wasn't going to be a win for them. Well, I'm curious to see what Angelo is feeling right now, because the Eagles got a huge win against a really good team in Brazil in non-ideal conditions. But then again, it's Angelo Cataldi. He's an idiot. He's a blowhard. He's all bark, no bite. The guy does not know anything about football. He's just there to get the fans riled up and rowdy. But when it comes to actually knowing the nuances of the game and understanding that this Eagles team with that offense is one of the best teams in the NFL, it's just ridiculous. I don't was on the radio for so long, but then again, he was successful in getting Eagles fans riled up. But when it comes to actual substance of football, he knows nothing. So I like to stick it to those who have a lot to say about the Eagles. So much for that 5-win season for the Philadelphia Eagles. Listen, I'm as critical of Nick Sirianni as the next guy, but I'm not so blinded by hatred that I'm willing to just completely go against my team and say, oh, they're going to win 5 games because I don't like the guy. I'm not the biggest fan, but come on, dude. Like Saquon, AJ, like, bro, like I said before, if this was a bad team, they wouldn't have been able to overcome the 3 turnovers. Bad teams don't overcome that. Good teams do. So, again, a lot of people had a lot of negative things to say about the Eagles. Hopefully that quiets some things down. So there's that with the Eagles. NFL Week 1 was fantastic. The first 2 games were incredible. The Chiefs get the win against the Ravens with Xavier Worthy there, given his speed dynamic and his playmaking ability. And then you factor in Rashid Rice, who looks like a number 1 wide receiver. That guy is smooth, man. You put a linebacker on him, forget it. They look like they're going to be a problem. I wouldn't lose sleep over the Ravens losing that game. I know, Lamar wasn't perfect, but again, it's Lamar Jackson. He will always keep you in a game with his legs. So I wouldn't lose too much sleep. And then you obviously had the Eagles and Packers putting on a great game. So that was the Thursday and Friday games. And then when you get into Sunday, you had the Steelers getting a win 18-10 over the Falcons. That was kind of a rough watch. Justin Fields gets the start over Russell Wilson, who was hurt. TJ Watt, just an absolute game wrecker. He was fantastic in that game. And if you had Chris Boswell on your fantasy team, congratulations, because he put on a show. So they get the win there. The Bills rally to beat the Cardinals. Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things, but if you're in a dogfight against the Cardinals, and I like the Cardinals, I think they've done some nice things in terms of roster building. I think Kyler Murray's better than people give credit to. I think that they have a bright future. I don't think they'll make the playoffs this year, but they're building something there. Contrary to what people think about Jonathan Gannon, the guy obviously knows how to coach. The Super Bowl, say what you want about that. Listen, that was indefensible, but the Eagles had record numbers in terms of sacks under that guy, so he clearly knows what he's doing. And but ultimately the Bills get the Bears rally, scored 24 unanswered points against the Tennessee Titans. Will Levis is not a good quarterback, dude. That guy is not it. He struggled. He essentially gave the Bears the game because Caleb Williams wasn't playing that well. But just a bad performance by Will Levis, essentially sealing the victory for the Bears. Credit to their defense. Bears do have a good defense, but still, when you're up 17-0, you got to find a way to win. And then the Patriots stunning the Bengals 16-10. Death taxes and Joe Burrow losing week 1. I know Joe Burrow's an elite quarterback, top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL, but he did not show up in that game at all. He struggled. That whole offense struggled. And kudos to the Patriots. There's not a lot of positive. There wasn't much of a positive outlook for the Patriots, but they get a big win on the road for Gerard Mayo in week 1. Texans outlast the Colts 29-27. I thought this was a great game. Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs proving that they're worth every penny for them. The new guys show up big. Despite the loss, I thought Anthony Richardson looked incredible. He's all the goods, man. And I think if you're a Colts fan, I wouldn't lose sleep over this loss. His arm talent is incredible. His athleticism is excellent. I think they have a bright future with that kid, especially with Shane Steichen, given what he was able to do with Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to do the same with Anthony Richardson. I think that guy is the real deal, Holyfield. And then the Dolphins beat the Jaguars. They rallied to come back 20-17. Tyreek Hill, man, what a day for him. He gets detained before the game, and then he's off to the races in a back-breaking play in that game against the Jaguars, and then locks up the celebration of the year, the handcuffs behind the back. It's over. Give him that celebration of the year. What a day for him. And then, my God, the Saints obliterate the Panthers. And believe it or not, I actually thought the Panthers were gonna cover that spread. They were +4. I liked the vibe with the Panthers. I liked who they had in their head coach. They weren't gonna get Harbaugh or Dan Quinn or anybody or Ben Johnson or anybody of significance, given their the fact that they have Dave Tepper as their owner and he has a short leash with coaches. But I thought, with what they needed somebody who's essentially a quarterback whisperer with Bryce Young. I mean, the guy did really good work with Geno Smith, getting him paid, resurrecting his career, doing good work with Baker Mayfield, resurrecting his career, getting him paid. But Bryce Young, man, it's not looking good. I know it's early, but man, I mean, the Saints, to me, that was a team that going into the season had the hottest seat at head coach in Dennis Allen. That was a team that if they didn't come out strong, you would talk. I mean, we're talking about a fire sale there because they're way over the cap. They need to rebuild ASAP. I mean, that was sort of the vibe. Action Network had a survey of the optimism rankings of NFL teams. The Saints were dead last. And with good reason, because, listen, I've always defended Derek Carr, but when you've never won a playoff game and you've never won a division title, I mean, that's kind of on you, dude. And they just they're way over the cap. They're middle of the road. They had to get something going, and boy, did they ever get going. Derek Carr had a really good game. Same with Alvin Kamara. A huge start to the season, and Panthers fans, that's tough. That's really tough. But then again, you could be a Giants fan losing Saquon Barkley, having Saquon Barkley get 3 touchdowns while you can't put up 0, or you put up 0 touchdowns. And, the Vikings just completely obliterated them, making Sam Darnold look like a world beater. And that's a mid-team in the Vikings. They have some good pieces. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's phenomenal. I think Kevin O'Connell's a very underrated coach, but they're middle of the road, and they looked like world beaters against the New York Giants, winning 28-6. And those uniforms, man, I almost feel bad going after Giants fans because it's rough. And that's all I'll say about the New York Giants. I'll stop right there because you guys have it rough right now. And then we had the Chargers beating the Raiders 22-10. Classic Harbaugh getting a dub, changing the culture there, running the football effectively, posing his will. I think they're going to do big things there. something's got to give with Devontae Adams. I have him on my fantasy team, and he can't be too happy with what's going on there. And hopefully he gets traded for my sake for my fantasy team. So there's that. The Seahawks win 26-20 against the Broncos. Seahawks are an underrated team. They have some good skill players, and their defense is really good. I like Mike McDaniel. He's widely respected throughout the league. He was the D coordinator for Michigan, and he did big things there, even though he was only there for a year. It was night and day from the Don Brown years. But he's a good coach. They have some good talent. I'm curious to see what they do. Don't sleep on the Seahawks. The Cowboys dominate the Cleveland Browns 33-17. Dallas pretty much had their way with them. But to me, that's not the big story. The big story is Deshaun Watson. What in the world happened to that guy? I mean, we're talking about a guy who was passing a couple years ago, and a guy who was known for extending plays and surveying the field and making right decisions with the football. And he's so far removed from that. And it shows you, man, like as good as the Browns are, their roster's easily top 10 in the NFL. They are loaded defensively. They have dudes at every single position group. They have Amari Cooper, who's like the 10th, anywhere from the 10th to the 15th best receiver. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They have Kevin Stefanski, who's a really good head coach, who made it work with the quarterback situation they had last year. But this guy ain't it, dude. I don't know what happened. And you build that roster up the right way, but you make one mistake at quarterback. You trade for a guy and you give him guaranteed money, and he lays an egg like that. That's catastrophic. It's catastrophic for your cap. It's catastrophic for your team because now you feel obligated to play him. I'm curious to see when Jameis Winston gets to play, because as a backup quarterback with those weapons, despite his mistakes, I mean, I think he would do a better job than Deshaun Watson. Like he's a shell of himself, and man, they're in a world of hurt right now with that contract, and it sucks, man, because Andrew Berry, who's a former Eagles front office guy, has done some really good things in terms of drafting, in terms of free agent acquisitions and trades. They have a really good roster. They have a ready-made roster to be a Super Bowl contender, believe it or not. But Deshaun Watson is their Achilles heel right now, and his mobility isn't even there. Like, he can't do anything like he once did. It was rough. It was a rough watch. But Dallas, did what they did. They took care of business. But ultimately, Deshaun Watson and his deficiencies were the was the storyline of that game. And then the Buccaneers beat the Commanders 37-20. How about Baker Mayfield, dude? Arguably the best quarterback of week one. 289 yards, 4 tutties. Man, is he good. Man. And it just shows you, dude, like, never say never. I mean, his career, it started off strong. He showed a lot of promise. He got a playoff win in Cleveland. And then, the wheels started to come off that car, so to speak. And then they felt obligated to trade for Deshaun Watson. But Baker Mayfield is clearly better than Deshaun Watson. And kudos to that guy, man, because I know a lot of people were giving him crap because, his personality might rub people the wrong way. People might misconstrue his competitive nature and his chip on his shoulder attitude with cockiness and arrogance, and that rubs people the wrong way. But he's really answered the bell. I mean, think about this. He's won a playoff game for an AFC team and an NFC team. That's incredible. And he's job there. Jaden Daniels did some nice things throughout the game, but he's got some room to improve. So I'll obviously keep an eye on the Commanders, given that they're a division foe. But the Buccaneers win there. And then the night game, the Lions in overtime, the first overtime game of the season, get the win 26-20. Really good game. Stars showed up for both teams. Both teams looking to make a Super Bowl push, and the Lions get the dub there, get revenge on Matthew Stafford. So that's week 1 in the NFL. Obviously, tonight we have the Jets against the 49ers. I'm curious to see how both teams look. There's a lot of noise with both teams this offseason, with Rodgers coming back from injury, and then all the holdouts with the 49ers. So that should be very interesting. But next, I want to talk about college football. Not a good game for the Wolverines. Not a good game for my Wolverines. But that was to be expected. Listen, dude, when you have a quarterback competition and you have a young team and you're going up against a ready-made contender who, to me, I think is a natty or bust team in Texas, that's what it looks like. I mean, listen, I love Davis Warren's story. You know, here's a guy that had leukemia in high school, and that essentially almost put the nail. I mean, that almost put the nail in the coffin of his college prospects. But he was a walk-on in Michigan. He earned the job. But there's just too many bad decisions, too many overthrows. It's going to be tough for the Wolverines to get going against these good teams. So, the season's not over. They still have leeway with the playoffs expanding to 12 teams. So it's not a nail in the coffin for the season. But ultimately, they kind of got exposed, and they have some work to do offensively. At this point, you might as well see what Tuttle has at quarterback. Clearly, they don't have enough confidence in Orgy to make to make the right decisions and with the football, throwing the ball, and then some of the decisions of running with him. They couldn't get anything going against Texas. So it's going to be rough for them. But Texas is the real deal. They're one of the best teams in the country. They're absolutely going to be there at the end of the season. So big win for them. Notre Dame, I mean, my God, talk about just an unforgivable loss to Northern Illinois. That is a classic example of not being prepared. You had a big win against Texas A&M the week before. You go on the road, and you're feeling yourself, and you see Northern Illinois on your goal in your home opener, and you're like, oh, well, all we got to do is show up. Well, you got beat by an inferior team who was ready to play, and you weren't. And that's on Freeman, the head coach. Just a catastrophic loss. Unforgivable, absolutely unforgivable. And that's just looking ahead and not being prepared. So there's that. And then Oregon, Oregon was one of those teams that a lot of people felt were one of the best teams in the country, but they don't look that at all. I mean, Dylan Gabriel has not looked good at all. And, Boise State from an outside Power 4, Power 5 team, they're one of the better teams. As a matter of fact, Oregon never beat them before. They did ultimately win, but it was a dogfight. They had to earn every bit of it. And they're not looking like the dominant team that everybody projected. So, yeah, that's college football. I'll talk a little bit later this week about some of the big games coming up. But let's talk about Sean Brady. Sean Brady with a huge statement victory against Gilbert Burns Saturday night. He wins unanimous decision. Two judges gave him 50-45. That's a clean sweep. And then 49-46, which I don't necessarily disagree with per se. I think you could, if you're going to give Gilbert Burns a round, it would be round 3. But ultimately, Brady got on top of him. He got the takedown late in the 3rd round, which sealed the deal for the other 2 judges. This was a huge win, and he had his way with Gilbert Burns throughout the fight. If you look at the stats, he landed a record total amount of strikes throughout the fight. Let's see here. I think he had like 200 plus strikes in the fight, or 276 fights? Sorry, I don't know why it's messed up here, but it's giving me wrong strikes. Come on. I don't know why. I'm on the UFC website looking at the totals, and it's just not cooperating with me right now. But anyway, he looked really good on the feet. He pretty much had his way with him on the feet. He was blasting him with leg kicks. He was hitting him with flurries and then would clinch, and just did not allow Gilbert Burns to have really any offense. He did have some moments. He did get a takedown on Brady, but Brady reversed it immediately. Brady looked really good in the scrambling department. Burns stuffed a handful of takedowns early on in the fight from Brady, but Brady was ultimately successful in getting 7 takedowns. He was 7 for 17, which is great against a guy like Gilbert Burns, who in jiu-jitsu. So he pretty much had his way with him. I was very impressed with the improvements in the striking. And he looked like a guy that can win a UFC title. And given the last fight against Kelvin Gastelum and now this fight with Gilbert Burns, I mean, he's just having his way with guys, and he's really answered the bell since the Bilal Muhammad loss, which is great. And it shows you that, you know, even though you can lose in MMA, unlike boxing, you can easily come back. And Brady's one of those guys that you know, keeps his head down and keeps working. And he dominated, absolutely dominated, and he showed great durability. He got hit a couple times by Gilbert Burns, but he was able to shut it down and dictate the fight after that. And then he was able to put on a clinic for 25 minutes, which was huge. That was another thing that I was looking forward to, because he really, when you watch his fights in the UFC, or all of his UFC fights have essentially been 50-minute fights, 3-round fights. Now he got a 5-round main event fight, and then he proved that he can go for 25 minutes. And he pretty much had his way with Gilbert Burns. So when you look at what's next, if you look at the divisions, obviously you have Bilal, who's champion. Then you have Leon Edwards, who's ranked 1. Kamaru Usman, who's ranked 2nd. Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's ranked 3rd, who probably get the title shot. Jack Della Maddalena's there at 4. They try to match him up with Brady a couple times. That could be an option. Colby Covington 5. There's talks of him fighting Dustin Poirier. And then Gilbert Burns was 6. Brady will be 6, maybe 5, given the dominant performance. Maybe knock Covington to 6. So you really could do a multitude of things. You can pair him up with Jack Della Maddalena, finally have that fight happen against 2 up-and-coming guys, determine who's the number 1 contender. Kamaru Usman, you know, still has some unfinished business. He's alluded to having unfinished business at welterweight. You could match him up with him, match him up with Leon. And I think he can win all those fights. I think Jack Della Maddalena has some deficiencies in the grappling, and Brady will expose that. And I think he can hold his own in the feet. Kamaru Usman looked good given the circumstances against Khamzat Chimaev in his middleweight fight on short notice last year, but he is long in the tooth. And like Gilbert Burns, that rent comes due when you got wear and tear on those tires. So I like that matchup. I like the matchup against Leon Edwards. I think Leon would have the advantage in the striking, but I think Brady will smother him on the ground. So one fight away, and you could possibly talk about a title shot for Sean. I like his chances against any of those guys. And listen, you know, the Bilal fight didn't end so well for him, but I think the improvements that I've seen from Brady, I think he can absolutely beat Bilal in the rematch. I think their grappling cancels out, and you know, if Brady can continue to elevate, you know, and improve on the feet, I really feel good about his chances against Bilal in the rematch. You know, and he's alluded to this numerous times. He said that the Bilal loss is the best thing that ever happened to him, and I believe it, because these last 2 performances, the one against Kelvin, the one against Gilbert Burns, were proof of that. I mean, he looked flawless. He's dictating the fight on the ground like he always does, but also adding wrinkles to his game. And his striking was on point on Saturday night. And if he continues to accelerate, I think he could be a UFC welterweight champion for sure. So Brady gets a huge win. Shout out to him. Good for him. You know, like I mentioned before, I do know him personally. Not best friends or anything, but I do know him. And, you know, knowing him and seeing the work that he's put in and seeing it all pay off is great. And kudos to him. Lastly, I want to talk about the Phillies. But before I do that, I want to let you know about our sponsor, Warlord Beard Oil. If you go to www.warlordbeardoil.com and use the promo code OLDSPORTS, you'll get 15% off site-wide. And if you spend $65 or more, you get free shipping. So if you go to www.warlordbeardoil.com and use the promo code OLDSPORTS for 15% off site-wide, you'll get 15% off site-wide. And if you spend $65 or more, you will get free shipping. So I'll talk a little bit about the Phillies. Candidly, I didn't watch a ton over the weekend. I was pretty much consumed with NFL, college football, and Sean Brady's fight. I'll take 4-2 on this road stand. It started off strong. Kyle Schwarber looked incredible. And that's something that we need going into October. A guy right off the bat that you have to contend with and worry about and dictating and setting the tone for games. I thought early on Cody Clemens did a really nice job of filling in for Alec Boehm, but clearly Alec Boehm was missed in the last two games. And, those last two games obviously weren't great. Nola had a rough outing on Saturday. And then, when you have one of those bullpen games like you did on Sunday, that's kind of what you get. So, I didn't watch a ton of Phillies, but from what I did watch, I will take the 4-2 record on the road. And then obviously they come back home and play the Rays. Hopefully they take advantage there. That's pretty much it for episode 3. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm super excited about the Eagles going forward. We have the NFL concluding week 1 tonight with the Jets and the 49ers. And I will catch you guys later this week. I plan on doing a podcast around Thursday or Friday. So I look forward to talking to you guys then. But until then, enjoy the rest of the week and enjoy that Monday night game.